In the early days of the pandemic, when Australia was isolated and there weren't any COVID cases here, life went on pretty much as normal. One sunny afternoon, I visited a good friend of mine named B_, who I hadn't seen in some time. He was living in a bungalow by the sea with his new partner M_, and I spent the rest of the day there with them, drinking and making art, and I eventually stayed for dinner. M_, was a great cook and friendly enough, maybe a little withdrawn. She didn't talk too much and seemed to have a quiet sadness about her. Later in the night, she told me about her father, who had raised his 2 daughters alone, and had recently passed from cancer. I saw a photo of him on the bureau, tanned and slightly plump with a gold watch, half smiling at the camera. She told me he was a great father and a huge inspiration to her, and was a monumental figure in her life. Losing him had been a great struggle for her. Late that night, I went home with a head full of alcohol. The day had left me with a good impression of M_. I was really happy for my friend. He had finally settled down and found a good partner. They had a beautiful life out there by the sea. As the pandemic worsened and the news from around the world got darker every day, I stayed in touch with my friend over the phone, and we planned on meeting up again. But days turned into weeks and then months, and we kind of drifted apart again. One afternoon, I was walking through a shopping mall on the way to the store to line up for some groceries. The area was pretty much deserted. Most of the shops were closed, and a grim silence hung over everything. I saw an _ walking towards me. She looked really pale and upset, with a wide look in her eyes. It looked like the pandemic had been hard on her, or maybe something really bad had happened. I smiled and waved at her, but she just looked right at me and walked past without saying anything. I went home a little puzzled by the experience. I kind of rationalized that she was probably a little upset that I had never come back to visit them, or that maybe there was something that had happened between my friend and M_ that made her not want to talk to me. The phone rang, and it was my friend B_. He had come home from work during his lunch break and had found M_ in the backyard, slumped over the stairs where she used to sit and take her cigarettes. She had died sometime in the morning. This is a true story. Names have been removed out of respect for the living. It was Friday evening. Everyone had already gone home except 5 students stuck in after-school detention. The teacher, Mr. Collins, left the room for a few minutes, telling them to stay quiet and finish their essays. The school hallways were silent, too silent, the kind of silence where every flickering light and Locker Creek feels alive. At 6:30 p.m., the power flickered once, twice, then went completely out. Emergency lights glowed red down the halls. One student, Lena, joked nervously, "Maybe the school's haunted." Everyone laughed until they heard a locker slam at the far end of the hall. They froze. Mr. Collins, no answer. The emergency lights started blinking slower, like a heartbeat. Lena grabbed her phone, no signal. She turned on her flashlight, and the beam caught something on the floor. Wet footprints leading from the locker toward the classroom door. They followed them until the prints stopped suddenly halfway through the hall. Then they heard a metal scraping sound from the science lab. When they peeked in, the room was empty except for one chair swinging slowly back and forth. On the chalkboard, written in faint white dust, "You shouldn't stay after dark." Panic set in. The door slammed shut behind them. Lights flickered, a faint shadow moved along the walls. One by one, their phones all died. Then, Lena saw it, someone standing at the end of the room. Not a student, not Mr. Collins. It looked like a man, but his face was blurry like static on an old TV. He whispered, "Where's my class?" They screamed, ran for the hallway, but every turn led them back to the same room. Finally, the fire alarm went off by itself, and the sprinklers burst open. The water cleared the chalkboard message, revealing old writing underneath. 1978. Fire drill, 6 students missing. Lena gasped. Then, through the water and flashing lights, she saw their reflections in the window, but only 4 of them were visible. 1 had vanished. The school doors finally burst open. Firefighters rushed in. They said the building's fire alarm had triggered automatically, even though the system had been disconnected since 1978. When they checked the footage later, the cameras showed something chilling. The 5 students sitting in detention, all staring at the same empty seat, and the faint shadow of a man pacing behind them, watching. They just wanted a break. Liam and Ava, dating for 3 years, decided to spend a weekend at a cozy cabin deep in the Oregon woods. No phones, no internet, just each other. The drive was peaceful, leaves falling, golden light fading into dusk. When they arrived, the cabin was perfect. Warm lights, wood smell, quiet forest around. But the owner, an older man with tired eyes, said one strange thing before leaving. "Whatever you hear after midnight, don't open the door." They laughed it off, thought he was just being dramatic. That night, they cooked, drank wine, and sat by the fire. Ava said she kept hearing something outside, like humming. Liam teased her, "It's the woods, babe. Relax." By midnight, the fire had dinned. They were about to sleep when they heard it. A knock at the door. Slow, rhythmic. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Liam peeked through the window. No one there. But muddy footprints led from the trees straight to their porch. Then they heard it again. This time, the knock came from the back door. Ava whispered, "Liam, someone's out there." He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. Nothing, just mist and silence. When he came back inside, Ava was gone. He called her name, no reply. Her phone still on the table, the front door wide open. He ran outside, shouting, searching, until he saw her standing near the tree line, her back turned. He sighed in relief. "Ava, what the hell are you doing?" She didn't move. He touched her shoulder, and she turned around slowly. Her face was pale, blank, eyes wide, unmoving. And then she whispered, in a flat voice, "You shouldn't have opened the door." Suddenly, the flashlight went out. When it flickered back, she was gone. The woods were empty. Liam ran back to the cabin, locked every door, shaking. He sat until sunrise. The owner came the next morning. Liam looked exhausted, rambling about voices, shadows, and Ava disappearing. The old man sighed. "You should have left when you heard the first knock." Then he pointed to a faded picture on the cabin wall, a photo of another couple, smiling, Ava and Liam, taken 20 years ago. When Sophie moved into the university hostel, she loved everything about it. The noise, the laughter, the feeling of freedom. But there was one floor no one liked. The top floor, silent, always cold, and half the lights never worked. Her roommate had dropped out last month, so Sophie got the whole room to herself. At first, it felt nice, until the nights got too quiet. One evening, while finishing an essay, she heard footsteps above her ceiling. She smiled to herself. Must be someone in the attic, except there was no attic. The top of her building was just the roof. The next night, the same sound returned, slow, heavy footsteps pacing back and forth, directly over her bed. When she told the hostel warden, he frowned. "There's no one up there. That floor was sealed years ago." That night, her door handle moved. Not a twist, just a slow push, like someone testing if it was locked. Her phone camera caught the sound of faint whisper in the background. Still awake, she moved downstairs to her friend Megan's room for the night. But even there, she couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m. her phone lit up. A notification. A live photo from her own gallery, taken 5 minutes ago of her sleeping from inside her old room? Panicked, she rushed to security. They went up with her, unlocking the door. The lights flickered. Her bag was open, her blanket folded neatly on the bed, and on the wall above it, hundreds of scratch marks, forming one word: stay. The warden ordered the floor sealed off again that same night. Sophie transferred to a new hostel. Weeks later, she got a new roommate who said casually, "You stayed at the Hillcrest hostel, right?" "My cousin did too." Sophie nodded. The girl smiled softly. She used to talk in her sleep about footsteps above her bed. Sophie froze. "What was her name?" The girl replied, "Megan." It's a quiet Friday night. Maya, a 27-year-old freelance graphic designer, is finally alone for the weekend. Her roommate left for a trip, and she's excited to rest. Netflix, snacks, and silence. Rain taps gently on the windows. The house creaks, the fridge hums, the wind moves through the trees, ordinary sounds. But something about the silence feels heavy, like the walls are listening. She laughs it off. "Too many true crime podcasts," she mutters. Around 10:30 p.m., Maya hears footsteps upstairs. Soft, measured. She freezes. She grabs her phone. No missed calls, no messages. The sound stops. Trying to stay calm, she tells herself it's the pipes or the wind. But when she walks into the kitchen, the back door, which she always locks, is slightly open. She locks it again, checks every window, every room. Everything's fine. Or so she thinks. The next morning, things feel off. Her favorite mug is missing. The living room clock is on the floor, and her laptop is open to a file she didn't touch. When she checks the security app, her cameras have been offline since midnight. Then an email appears in her inbox. Subject: "You shouldn't live alone." No sender. No message. Her breath quickens. She deletes it. Maybe a spam glitch. But later, when she looks at the kitchen counter, the missing mug is there, filled with fresh coffee. She hasn't made coffee all day. By night, she's paranoid. Every creak sounds like a whisper. She leaves all the lights on, trying to work. Then, a thump upstairs. Followed by another. Her hands shake as she calls her friend, but the signal cuts out. The house is breathing again, expanding, groaning, as if something alive is in the walls. She takes a kitchen knife and climbs the stairs slowly, one creak at a time. At the end of the hallway, her bedroom door is open, lights off. Inside, on the mirror, written in fog, "Stop moving my things." Maya runs out of the house and calls the police. When they arrive, they search every inch. No one there. But in the attic, they find a small mattress, food wrappers, and her missing clothes. Someone had been living above her for weeks. They had a hidden entrance behind the closet. He watched her, listened, moved things when she slept. Maya breaks down in shock, but she's alive, lucky to have escaped before the intruder snapped. Weeks later, she moves to a new apartment, bright, modern, safe. But as she unpacks, she finds a folded piece of paper inside one of her boxes. It reads, "You moved again. I like the old house better." The camera pans to her new window, and in the reflection, for just a second, a shadow moves behind her. It was the start of a new semester. 3 friends, Nora, James, and Eli, checked into an old college hostel that had recently reopened after being closed for years. They got room. The warden gave them the key but hesitated before handing it over. "Don't leave the window open at night," he said quietly. They laughed it off, typical old building superstition. The hostel looked ancient, cracked walls, squeaky floors, and a long hallway where every sound echoed twice. That first night, Nora woke up around 2 a.m. She heard whispering, soft and even, like someone talking through water. She nudged James. "Do you hear that?" He didn't, until the whispering turned into faint scratching, right under the bed. They froze. James leaned down with his phone light. Nothing there. But on the floor, carved into the wood, were faint words, "Don't open the window." The next morning, They asked the warden about it. He said nothing, just walked away. That night, curiosity won. Eli said, "It's probably just squirrels or something," and pushed open the window. Cold wind rushed in. Everything went silent. Around 3 a.m., Nora woke again. The window was still open, curtains fluttering, and Ellie's bed was empty. They searched everywhere, bathroom, hallway, rooftop, nothing. When they told the warden, he looked terrified. He whispered, "You shouldn't have opened it." The next day, the police searched the area but found no trace of Eli. Nora and James decided to pack and leave that night. While packing, Nora noticed Ellie's notebook on the desk, open to the last page, the ink still fresh. The window calls your name before it takes you. Just then, the window latch moved on its own, creaking open slowly. A cold hand gripped the edge of the sill. James ran forward and slammed it shut, locking it tight. Nora screamed. There were handprints all over the glass, from the outside. They rushed out, dragging their bags, and never came back. Months later, the hostel closed again. Rumors said a worker found 3 beds in room neatly made, and a 4th right under the floorboards. It was Halloween night. College friends gathered at an old farmhouse on the edge of town, the kind of place everyone joked was definitely haunted. Music blared, strobe lights flashed, people laughed, drank, danced. Everyone was in costume, vampires, clowns, zombies. And then there was him, a tall figure in a black cloak and cracked white mask. No one recognized him, but everyone assumed he was someone's friend. "Nice costume," one girl said, laughing. The masked man didn't reply, just tilted his head slowly, then walked away. Around midnight, the power flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. People cheered, thinking it was part of the show. Someone yelled, "Turn the lights back on." When the lights finally came back, one person was missing, Kyle. Everyone thought he'd gone outside for air, until someone found his phone, still recording, lying near the back door. On the screen, the last thing it showed, Kyle filming the party, panning over the crowd. Then the masked man standing right behind him. Panic started spreading. The host, Emma, told everyone to stay calm. It was probably just a prank. But then people noticed the masked man was gone. One by one, the guests started leaving. Only a handful stayed to help Emma clean up. They joked nervously, pretending not to be scared. Then, someone noticed muddy footprints leading down to the basement. "Probably Kyle again," one said. But the prints were too big, heavy. What? Like someone had walked straight out of the woods. Emma grabbed a flashlight and opened the basement door. Cold air drifted up. She called out, "Hello, Kyle." A whisper echoed back, "Emma." She froze. The light flickered, and for a moment, she saw the mask at the bottom of the stairs, glowing faintly in the dark. She screamed, slammed the door shut. When she turned around, her friends were gone. Only the music still played, skipping on the same line. "You're not alone tonight." The next morning, police found the farmhouse empty, all the cars still parked outside. Inside, the walls were covered in handprints, black, muddy, smudged, and in the middle of the living room, sitting on the couch, was the cracked white mask with a note underneath, "Thanks for the party." One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting in class and doing math. It was 6 more minutes until after school. As he was doing his homework, something caught his eye. His desk was next to the window, and he turned and looked to the grass outside. It looked like a picture. When school was over, he ran to the spot where he saw it. He ran fast so that no one else could grab it. He picked it up and smiled. It had a picture of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes, and her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful he wanted to meet her. So he ran all over the school and asked everyone if they knew her or have ever seen her before. But everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he was home, he asked his older sister if she knew the girl. But unfortunately, she also said no. It was very late, so Tom walked up the stairs, placed a picture on his bedside table, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awakened by a tap on his window. It was like a nail tapping. He got scared. After the tapping, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow near his window, so he got out of his bed, walked toward his window, opened it up, and followed the giggling. By the time he reached it, it was Ganeth. Next day again, he asked his neighbors if they knew her. Everybody said, sorry, no. When his mother came home, he even asked her if she knew her. She said no. He went to his room, placed a picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again, he was awakened by a tapping. He took the picture and followed the giggling. He walked across the road when suddenly he got hit by a car. He was dead with the picture in his hand. The driver got out of the car and tried to help him, but it was too late. Suddenly he saw the picture and picked it up. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the U.S. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me, and then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the foo? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road, and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile. But he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. Last night, my son came into my room. I woke up to him looking down at me with wide eyes. This was pretty unusual. He usually slept peacefully through the night, and never had nightmares of any kind. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked softly. "I can't sleep," he replied. His eyes began to water a little bit, but he kept a straight face. "What's wrong?" I sat up and began to rub my eyes until my son interrupted me and pulled my hands away. "Don't close your eyes, Mommy. It comes closer when you do that," he whispered. I stared at him. Tears began to fall from his eyes, and I realized he hadn't closed them since he came to my room that night. I looked out past the chilly, empty hallway and into my son's room. Nothing. After hearing my son suck in a horrified breath when I closed my eyes, something creaked in the house. My eyes opened to a dark, mangily hunched-over figure staring back at me with white bloodshot eyes. It kept its gaze on me, and mine on his. It felt like a staring contest. Only whenever you blink, you lose, and it moves forward to greet you. I always hated games like these when I was a child. We've gone through 2 bottles of eye drops. Good thing I stocked up on an extra bottle. You might never know when you need them. The last one is almost gone though, and my son and I are drying up again. The figure in his room made its move a couple of times from our mistakes, and hasn't strayed from my doorway since. 2 hours. There's only 2 more hours until the sun is expected to come up, but I don't know if we can last that long. I remember how great it feels to envelop my eyes under my eyelids. It's at the side of my bed now. My son cries with his eyes open, and it looks like it's helping him. It's to Bedtime, the one with the case of dry eyes. And now, I can feel its horrid, stinking breath upon my face. A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the 2 children were already fast asleep in bed. So the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and went to watch TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs because they did not have cable downstairs. So she called them and asked them if she could watch cable in the parents' room. The parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth, because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father who was talking to the babysitter at the time said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We don't own a statue." The police found both of the children, and the babysitter slumped in pools of their own blood within 3 minutes of the call. No statue was found. They say the girl is strong, but why not say the eldest daughter? They say eldest daughters are the toughest men you'll ever find, the ones who die, cry, and revive themselves again, leaving no trace behind. She bears the weight of family conflicts, often caught in the middle of her parents' fights. Of course, she leans slightly toward her mother's side, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love her father. She adores him. He is, without a doubt, the best dad in the world in her eyes. But as a husband, he failed, and that is no surprise. Now, she struggles with trust issues, unable to trust any man, no matter how much they try. Not because she believes all men are bad, but what if they turn out like her father someday? She cries every night, burdened by family issues, life struggles, and the boy she can't quite accept, too afraid to love, too hurt to forget. All because she is the eldest daughter. She can't allow herself to break, because if she does, her younger siblings might follow her path, and indirectly, she feels she would ruin their lives. But no one sees that her life is already a living hell. After all, she is the eldest daughter. She is not heartless or mean. She cries alone, not because she wants to, but because no one could ever handle how she truly feels. I've always been obsessed with old stories, the kind that are whispered at night and never written down. Being a teen author, I thought it would be poetic to return to my roots, to my father's village, and collect the forgotten tales buried there. But my father, he never approved of it. He used to say, some stories are better left untold. As a kid, I was allowed there only during festivals, and even then, I wasn't allowed to wander near the old pond or my grandmother's abandoned hut. They said my grandmother was a healer once. Others said she was something else. Some villagers still call her Dianima, the witch who could talk to shadows. My father hated when anyone mentioned her. When I finally went back last month, things didn't feel right. The air was thick, heavier than I remembered. Every night I'd hear the same tapping sound on my window, like knuckles brushing against the glass. One night I opened it and found nothing but the faint scent of burnt incense and wet soil. The next morning, one of the elders looked at me strangely and said, "You look just like her when she came back." Since that day, my phone stopped recording properly. Some of the audio I captured has whispers, in a voice that sounds eerily like my grandmother's. I came here to collect stories for my book, The Night Speaks, folklore from rural India. But I think some stories are now collecting me. I was going to the store about 10:30 p.m. My car overheats. I live in a very rural area. Pull over, let it cool down, check radiator, and drive a couple more miles, and it overheats again. At this point it's after midnight, and I am not too far away from my house, 1.5-mile walk. It's a pretty night, just a little chilly. So I decide instead of risking hurting the car, I'll just hoof it. The road I live on is a very rough mountainous RD made of dirt, and I was not far from it, so I strike up, not too worried because I knew why the car overheated, and I needed a walk anyway. I walked down the 2L highway, then 2/3 or so down my dirt road. I'm moving a good clip. There was some moonlight enough to where I didn't need a flashlight anyway. I see something coming up a neighbor's driveway and hear faint steps on the gravel on my left. It's walking right up that driveway out towards the main road where I am walking past. My first thought is, shit, one of the neighbors heard or saw me walking down our road in the middle of the night and think I'm messing around, casing houses or something. At any moment I expect to see a flashlight, a gun, or a combination of the two, and some questions. Then I realize what I am seeing. There is a man walking towards me, except I can see through him. It kinda was like Predator in the beginning, where it took on the texture of the surrounding trees, but as it got closer, it was very much a man, a little bigger build, but the same height, wearing what I thought was a plaid lumberjack-style shirt and denim pants, and he had longer hair, Ila Theo Von kinda. He walks out of the driveway within about 30 feet, and he comes alongside me, and walks beside me for about 100 to 150 feet, 30 feet to my left along this split-rail wooden fence. When I get to the end of that fence, he stops and puts his arm up on it and just stares at me. I did not say a word. I just kept walking, the hair on my head standing on end. I saw the man. I also saw through him. It was just like when they beam people up in Star Trek when they look faint. It was like he was 40% solid maybe, and only 30 feet away for a good 1 to 2 minutes straight. He deliberately came down that driveway to meet me on the road and walked beside me watching me. The look he had was sad, or like he wanted to tell me something but couldn't find his voice. So, I keep walking and I'm terrified to look back, and I just keep saying to myself, WTF, 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 did that just really happen? I was never scared really, just more in disbelief of what I had witnessed. I began to get really disturbed by it as I got closer to my house, it creeping me out more and more. So the next morning I'm in the kitchen telling my dad about it, how I've always believed in aliens and UFOs, but never ghosts, not in the slightest, and he's looking at me skeptically for sure. But then he wanted to know exactly where. Suddenly it dawns on me, I remember him telling me about a year ago, before I moved back in, that one of the neighbors we barely knew had killed himself in that house down the driveway where that split rail fence is. I have tears in my eyes and my hair is standing on end, and my nerves are electrified writing this now. Up until the other night I thought all paranormal activity was outright BS. Then I saw a ghost. Like I'll take a polygraph. God strike me dead if I am lying. Saw a ghost with my own sober eyes. I can only guess it was that unfortunate soul. I have been shaken ever since. Please feel free to share any thoughts. I am still wigged out. I haven't felt anything in weeks. Not hunger, not tiredness, not emotion. I know that this is wrong, but it doesn't make me scared. I wish it would. 3 weeks ago was the last time I felt human. A 12-hour shift in the emergency room is about as human as anyone can feel. I felt grief, exhaustion, panic, and relief when my shift finally ended. I changed out of my scrubs, gathered my things, and headed out into the parking garage. It was 4 a.m. and the parking garage was virtually abandoned. I was completely tuned out to the world around me. The only thought in my mind was the thought of a warm shower and sleep. Maybe that's how I missed it. But part of me thinks there isn't such a rational explanation. I heard a noise behind me, almost like the cracking of a joint. I pivoted on my feet and immediately froze with fear. Standing a few feet behind me was a woman, or something that looked like one. It was hunched over awkwardly with its head cocked at an angle, and its face was horrifyingly expressionless. Its eyes were like glass orbs with nothing behind them, and it didn't appear to be breathing. I'll admit, I first thought it was a junkie, but there was something about it that made it feel almost like an inanimate object. The woman thing took a shuddering inhale and spoke in a completely monotone manner. "I think you're very pretty," it rasped. The lack of emotion frightened me. With no context, I couldn't tell if the words were a compliment, a statement, or some sort of perverted threat. Then it pulled up the corners of its mouth in a strange grimace. It took me a moment, but then I realized it was trying to smile. A horrifying smile. It looked almost predatory in nature. Once again, it said, "I think you're very pretty." I stumbled back, and as I did, it took an awkward step towards me. Again, I moved, and it seemed to mirror me. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like a cornered animal. I locked eyes with it. Its glassy eyes didn't seem completely hollow anymore. I could see something behind them, an almost pleading look. "I think you're very pretty." Its words were no longer monotone. They were desperate and violent and horrifying. I turned away from it and made a mad dash for my car, but as I did, I heard a sound. The sound was distinctly human. Crying. I turned around and saw that whatever it was crying. That's when rational thought returned to me. I was a nurse in the hospital parking garage. This was someone in need of help. In my tired delirium, I had somehow mistaken this woman in distress for some sort of monster. A guilty empathy rushed into me, and I cautiously approached the figure, who was now sobbing into her hands. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I asked as I reached a comforting hand out to touch her shoulder. As soon as my hand made contact, the crying stopped. Its body again became mechanically stiff. Before I could even react, I felt an iron grip on my wrist. It was inhumanly strong and horrifyingly cold. The creature's face lifted to meet my gaze. "I think you're very pretty." The words were said with a warm comfort. The creature's eyes filled with gratitude and kindness, and the woman smiled at me, a real smile this time. The cold grip softened, and the hand grew warm. This was no longer an inhuman creature. This was a kind woman. She let me go and walked away. As I drove home, I began to convince myself that I had imagined all of the strange parts of this conversation. I told myself that the stress of a long day had caused me to convince myself that this interaction was anything out of the ordinary. And I realized that I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel uncomfortable. In fact, I wasn't stressed or tired, which was quite unusual considering all that had happened during my shift. When I went home and showered, I found that the warmth didn't feel comforting. When I told my husband good night, there was no love in my heart. When I woke up and ate breakfast, the taste wasn't pleasant and the food wasn't filling. This has been my reality for the past 3 weeks. I am not stressed. I am not tired. I am not hungry. I do not hate anything. I do not love anything. I do not want anything. Nothing brings me joy. My days have been filled with emptiness. That was until I saw her sitting there, a brunette woman maybe in her late 20s. Right now she's on the phone with someone and she is laughing. She has an infectious laugh and a beautiful smile. I don't know where she's going, but wherever she's going, she seems happy. I think the most beautiful thing someone can be is happy. I wish I could be happy. I wish I could be her. I think she's very pretty. Jenny had always been afraid of the dark. She had lost her sight at a young age, and the world had always been a scary place for her. But she had learned to cope, and she had always felt safe as long as she was with her husband. He was her rock, her guide, and she trusted him with all her heart. So, when he went away on a business trip, leaving her alone in their house, Jenny was terrified. She had never been alone before, and the thought of it filled her with dread. But she knew that she had to be strong. She was a grown woman, and she couldn't let her fears get the best of her. So she went about her day, doing all the things she normally did. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, and listened to her audiobooks. And every night, when she went to bed, she cuddled up next to her husband's pillow, pretending that he was there with her. It was a strange and unsettling routine, but it gave Jenny comfort. She knew that she was safe, and that was all that mattered. But one night, as she lay in bed, something changed. Jenny felt a presence in the room, a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that it was just her imagination. But as the minutes ticked by, the feeling grew stronger. Jenny couldn't take it anymore. She reached out and touched her husband's pillow, hoping to feel his familiar warmth. But instead of the soft cotton she expected, she felt something cold and clammy. She recoiled in horror, her heart racing as she realized that she wasn't alone. There was something in the room with her, something evil and malevolent. She could feel its presence, its breath on her neck, and she knew that she had to get out. She scrambled out of bed and ran for the door, her hands outstretched as she tried to find her way. She could hear the thing behind her, its footsteps pounding the floor as it followed her. She stumbled and fell, her hands scraping the floor as she tried to crawl away. She could feel the thing closing in, its hot breath on her neck as it prepared to strike. Just when she thought it was all over, she heard a voice in the darkness. It was her husband, his voice full of concern as he called out to her. Jenny's heart soared with hope. She struggled to her feet and ran towards the sound of his voice, her hands outstretched as she tried to find him. But as she drew closer, she realized that something was wrong. The voice was different, deeper, and more sinister. It was the monster, mimicking her husband's voice in order to lure her in. Jenny froze in terror, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way out. She couldn't let the monster win, not after everything she had been through. She turned and ran, her feet pounding the floor as she fought to escape. She could hear the monster behind her, its footsteps growing louder and louder as it closed in. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running, but she knew that she had to try. She had to survive, no matter what. But it was too late. The monster was too fast, and before Jenny knew what was happening, it was on top of her. She screamed as it tore into her flesh, its razor-sharp claws slicing through her skin. She fought with all her might, but it was no use. The monster was too strong, and Jenny knew that she was doomed. She closed her eyes, accepting her fate as the monster's claws dug into her flesh. I don't even know where to start, but what happened to me 10 years ago is something I can't forget to this day. No matter how hard I try to rationalize it, I've never found an explanation that makes sense except that it was something unnatural. I had been married for 2 years, living in an old family house, the kind built decades ago. One day, my mother-in-law fell very ill. I tried to stay by her side and help in every way I could. I decided to spend the night at her place, just in case she needed me if she woke up during the night. That night, my husband's niece also stayed over at her grandmother's. So it was the three of us in one room. I told them, "You both sleep on the bed, I'll sleep on the floor," and I laid a blanket on the tiles, wrapped myself up, and tried to get warm. It was winter cold enough that the wind howled through the window cracks. Midnight passed, and everything was completely still, the kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. I was just about to drift off when I suddenly felt something strange. Someone was breathing beside me, a warm breath, so close, too close. It was right above the blanket covering me. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but no, the sound was real. Heavy, labored breathing. My heart started pounding, and sweat ran down my face even though the air was freezing. I slowly reached toward the lamp beside me, but before I could touch it, I felt a foot press down on mine. A real solid step, heavy, not my imagination. Every muscle in my body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I held my breath, staring at the blanket as it shifted slightly. Something was crawling across it, slowly, deliberately. I gathered every ounce of courage I had and, with a trembling hand, yanked the blanket off me in one motion. Nothing. No one, not a sound. The room was locked from the inside, the key still in its place. I turned to look at my mother-in-law and the girl. They were fast asleep, faces calm, breathing evenly. There was no one else in the room. Then I looked down at the floor and gasped. The blanket was crumpled near my feet, as if someone had really been standing there. Terrified, I bolted onto the bed between them, pulled the covers up, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I couldn't close my eyes, not even for a second. When daylight finally crept through the window, I felt like I had survived by some miracle. I got up and froze again. On my foot, right where I had felt the pressure, was a red mark. Not a bruise, not a bump, but a strange print like a hand or fingers burned into my skin. It looked as if something hot, something not human, had touched me. Ever since that night, whenever I remember what happened, my heart starts racing. I can't call it a dream or a hallucination. I was fully awake. I heard every breath, every movement. I felt the cold sinking into my bones and the weight on my foot. And the thing that still haunts me, the thing that convinces me I wasn't alone that night, is that feeling, that undeniable sense that something was in the room with me. Something that wasn't human. I needed the extra cash for my classes, so I took the overnight shift at my local library. It started like any other shift. 5 p.m., the usual rush of college students from the nearby university, and some homeless people reading the newspaper. By midnight, it was dead. Just me, the ambient hum of the fluorescent lights, and the sound of occasional cars passing outside. Round 2 a.m., sitting at the periodical desk, the exhaustion hit me. I must have dozed off, because the dream was immediate and terrifyingly vivid. I was standing outside a tall, glass-fronted bar. I don't know where it was, but it was packed. Suddenly, a massive fire erupted on one of the middle floors. I watched frozen as the silhouettes of people panicked. They were all screaming, but I couldn't hear a single sound. It was like watching a silent movie. A glass elevator, crammed with people, detached from its cables and plummeted, hitting the lobby with a force I could feel in my chest. Then people started falling from the balconies and the terrace. They didn't jump, they just fell. They hit the pavement like rocks, their bodies remaining rigid. As they kept falling, one after another, their bodies piled up. I couldn't move, forced to just watch as the pile grew into a mountain of broken bodies. I jerked awake, my heart hammering. My neck ached. I was still at the library desk. The relief was so intense I almost laughed. Just a nightmare, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. I decided to get up and walk around, finish sorting the returns to stay awake. That's when I saw it in my peripheral vision, a figure standing in the stacks, all black, like a shadow that had peeled itself off the wall. I thought my eyes were just playing tricks on me, still hazy from the dream. I brushed it off and went back to the desk, deciding to just rest my head for a minute. That's when the second dream started, or at least what I thought was a dream. I was awake, but I couldn't move. The shadow figure walked out of the stacks and slowly approached me. This time, I saw it vividly. It had glowing, grimacing red eyes and a twisted smile that stretched impossibly wide, filled with long, sharp yellowish teeth. Its neck was elongated, bending like a giraffe's, and its body was covered in some thick liquid, like a mixture of fresh blood, tar, and mud. It walked toward me slowly. I was completely frozen, screaming inside my own head. All I could do was shut my eyes tight. The next thing I knew, I felt its hot, foul breath on my face. I opened my eyes. Its face was inches from mine. It let out a shriek so high-pitched and piercing that my vision blurred, and everything went black. I woke up slumped in the same position I was in before I dozed off. The morning sun was streaming through the high windows. It was 6 o'clock a.m. I felt hollowed out, but relieved. It was just a nightmare, layered on top of another one, the product of stress and exhaustion. I packed my bag, clocked out, and headed for the door. The security guard was waiting for me. He usually just waves, but today he had this pale, horrifying look on his face. "Hey," I said, my voice hoarse. "Can you come to the office?" he asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He escorted me to the small maintenance room and set me in front of the CCTV monitors. "I was doing my nightly review," he said, his voice shaky. "I have to ask, what were you doing last night?" Confused, I just stared at him. He hit play. He fast-forwarded to around 3 a.m., right after I'd woken up from the bar fire dream. The footage showed me standing up from the periodical desk and walking to the history aisle. But it wasn't me. Not really. I was just standing there, staring at a wall for almost an hour. Then, in one abrupt and natural motion, my head turned 180 degrees to look directly at the camera. My eyes were glowing bright red in the night vision feed, and the camera clearly captured a wide, grimacing smile. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was about to be sick. I was asleep. I was dreaming. "I know," Frank said quietly, not looking at me. "That's not the part that scared me." He rewound the tape to 2:15 a.m., right when I thought I was having the first dream, the one about the bar fire. On the screen, I wasn't asleep. I was sitting at the front desk, perfectly still. I had taken a stack of overdue notice slips and a red pen from the cup. For 45 solid minutes, I was drawing, Frank zoomed the camera in as tight as it would go. It was greedy, but unmistakable. I had drawn the bar, the glass elevator, broken on the ground floor, the figures frozen and rigid, falling from the terrace. And at the bottom, sketched with frantic, overlapping lines, was the mountain of bodies. I'd never worked a night shift again, but I can't get the images out of my head. Every single morning, I grab my phone, my hand shaking, and I search the news, dreading the day I see that drawing in a photograph. I'll start by saying I do believe in the paranormal, and have for most of my life. I've had multiple experiences, and this is probably the most terrifying one. This was years ago and I was probably 18 or 19 at the time. My girlfriend's, now ex-family, had owned a farmhouse out of town a ways from where we lived. It had been in their family for a while. It was just a house in the woods. It sat on a little pond, but other than that it was just trees all surrounding the house. It was old and kind of falling apart, but the family kept it alive, and it was mainly where they would stay and go during the winter to go hunting. My girlfriend's family often let her go to the farmhouse with friends and throw parties, or would let her brother and his friends go there and do what county boys do. I had been to the farmhouse a good many times at this point, and didn't have much to be afraid of. My girlfriend did once tell me a story about one time she was there with her friends, and they did an Ouija board session, and spooky stuff happened. She said after that she didn't go to the farmhouse for a few years because she was too scared. Eventually she started going back and nothing had happened since, so she thought it was fine. I never really believed her story, even though I believe in the paranormal. Ouija boards I was always skeptical of. There was only one thing I didn't like about the farmhouse: the hallway and the back bedrooms. The hallway led to the back bedrooms and also led to the bathroom. For some reason I just always had gotten a bad vibe from the hallway and bedrooms. It just wasn't right. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I'd often just opt to go pee outside in the middle of the night in the creepy pitch-black woods just so I didn't have to go into the hallway. Now, one time I was there with my girlfriend and her brother and her brother's two friends. So 5 of us total. Her brother and his friends were super chill country boys. They know how to have a good time. They were there to hunt, but when they came back we would all hang out, drink, smoke, play games, etc. I also want to say that these 3 dudes are all heavy Christian and do not believe in the paranormal. It's nighttime and we're all in the living room, and we have a sheet up that we're using a projector to cast up Mario Kart on. We're all playing in the living room when all of a sudden we all hear a thunder crash. Felt like you could feel it in your chest. We all shot up and were all a little spooked. We deduced that the sound definitely came from the back bedrooms. We had thought a tree had fallen down onto the house. This happened to them before to one of the sheds that was on the property, so we didn't think much of it. We all go to the back bedrooms and the first 2 are normal. But we get to the one in the very back and everything in the room was thrown to the right side of the room and wall. The rooms were decently bare, but had a queen bed, 2 dressers, a recliner, and a couple lamps. The rooms were always just set and ready for anyone who needed to sleep there. All of that was thrown against the wall, the bed almost vertical with the wall as well as the chair and dressers. We saw that, and all the blood left my face, and I had the biggest chill down my spine. The room was complete fine before. It was the room her brother usually claimed, and he had put his stuff. After that we all literally booked it out, snatched the essentials, and got TF out of there. Her brother never got to get his bag, but it didn't seem like he just ours before. We went back to my girlfriend's house to tell her parents, but they were pretty religious. They wouldn't hear it. My girlfriend and brother begged their dad to go check it out. It was pretty regular that the dad would go to the farmhouse to do work and regular maintenance checks. So he said he would go in a few days. The few days go by and he drives down to check it out. Comes back and reports that nothing was out of place. The room was completely normal, nothing out of place. and her brother's bag was sitting on the end of the bed. Their dad was pissed at us, saying we were just doing some stupid prank. Needless to say, I never went back there.